Until the lion can write, every story will glorify the hunter. Welcome to the Roots and Realities. I'm your host, Donna Emojefi Osai. It is saddening that we have had people shape our story, alter them, and in worst case scenario, they have even erased some part of our stories. In Roots and Realities, we'll be going back into time and be telling us how our stories evolved. We're going to tell the African stories by African people who lived the African story, who breathed the African story, and are enthusiastic to tell us the African stories. On this first episode of Roots and Realities, we have as guests wonderful gentlemen, foremost storytellers. I'll let them introduce themselves.
My name is Professor Godini Dara Urobo, and professionally a storyteller. I've done 54 years fieldwork research on oral literature and folklore. So, in terms of Africa, I'm a leading scholar of oral literature and folklore. I specialize on Urhobo folklore and oral literature, particularly music and song. And I've done it for 55 years now. So I belong to many associations. Of course, a member of the Nigeria Academy of Letters. I was president of Nigeria Folklore Society. I'm the chairman of the Bruce Onubrakboyan Foundation. Of course, I taught the subject of oral literature for about 40 years in about several universities, including universities in the US. I'm a storyteller par excellence. And I think I'm the oldest and the most experienced scholar of oral literature and folklore of Udu and Uyeme, if not the whole of Urhobo. In Uyeme, they call me Ogba Onye, that is Archbishop of Knowledge. At every field of knowledge you encounter me, I will give you an answer. I'm one of the few Africans who know the scholarship, academic knowledge of orality. Beyond that, I'm also in the whole of Africa now, according to the records. I'm the only one who can sing 120 Urhobo songs and dance to it. So both academic and practice and experience, completely involved.
Wow, that was quite a resume. Yes, a heavyweight storyteller there. We'll move on to our next guest, Chief. Let's meet you.
My name's Lucky Jerry Esigi, a chief. I'm a businessman. I have run a supermarket for the past 55 years. And I'm also a professional marketer. I'm not just only doing the supermarket, but I also do a lot of research, wholesales, retail, about products within the content of our market. I'm the chief managing director of Esco Superstores Limited. It's a trading house. And we've been able to put that name to every household in Warri.
Yes, back in the days in Warri, if you ever entered a superstore, you were at Esco Superstores. Honored to have you here. Thank you for coming. So we'll move over to the gentleman behind.
now Jericho, a seasoned civil servant, I would say. But I think I spent part of my good years in the classroom, and for which I'm grateful. I hold a BA in English, with a drift for literature. And when you talk about storytelling, I think that's specifically my area. I had the opportunity of studying under people like Professor Chinua Achebe, who I would describe as a master storyteller in the whole of Africa. Professor Donald Tusibe Wonga, Ogechi, and others. So when it comes to the question of storytelling, I think I have been so packaged as to be able to put at least a word into the world of storytelling with some level of confidence. It's my pleasure to be on this platform.
A teacher by training and by choice. I've taught at every level of Nigeria's educational system, primary, secondary, tertiary. Today, by God's grace, I'm the founder and proprietor of Master Builder Institute of Media Studies, where we are today at Otiro, Delta State. Thank you.
This table, like I said initially, this table is, at best, is epic. Everybody here is a heavyweight in their own right. I'm glad to be in your company. On this episode, we'll begin from the beginning of storytelling. So, Prof, this on your turf. You're going to put us in context. What is the authentic African storytelling?
Thank you for introducing this. Africans are the owners of storytelling. We are the first people in the world to tell stories. Chinua Achebe said it, that the world is made up of stories. Once upon a time, and then the story goes. And there are many Africans who introduced storytelling, who invented storytelling. So we are the owner of that art called storytelling. It changes from generation to generation, from civilization to civilization, from medium to medium. Now we are using this electronic medium. 50 years ago, 100 years ago, probably we sit under a tree or in the corridor in the evening after farm to narrate the story. But storytelling is the reason why the world exists. That is, without storytelling, there are no human beings. And without stories, the world will stop. The art of storytelling originated from Black Africa. We are the people who invented it. And we invented it because storytelling is speech, is verbal narration. And Black Africans are people who also originated speech. Oteta. At the time that happened, there were no white people in the world. Take my word for it. We were the first human beings to speak language. And this happened in part of East Africa, like Kenya and Tanzania, and also the Omo Valley of Ethiopia. Those are the most ancient beings in the world. What I'm saying now is older than the Old Testament of the Bible, which is about 6,000 years ago. So speech, human speech, originated from African people. And speech is where your stories come from. When you have an event, an experience, and you want to narrate it from stage to stage, that is what you call storytelling. And this young African writer, Urhobo writer, Ben Okri from Ogele, one of the greatest writers in the world based in the UK now, he defined it that a storyteller is like a seer, is like a prophet, somebody who can look at the back and then look at the future and guide humanity. But storytelling is different from just talking. I can give you an instance that I was doing something at Ogrode yesterday, and so I drank a bottle of beer. That will not be a story. We are talking about stories that create pleasure, that also create knowledge. In the old Latin language of Italy, it's called utile et dolce, something that is useful and is also sweet to hear. So various languages have names for it. In Nigeria, where you have 520 languages, if you ask them, each one will tell you what the story is. Yoruba will say Osia. Maybe Isoko will say also Osia. Ijo will say Egberi, you know. So different languages have names for it. But the idea of story is an event that is narrated from stage to stage for the purpose of educating, enlightening the hearers, at the same time giving them pleasure, something that they will remember for a long time. That art was invented by black people. Now, these days, you can have a written version, like a novel or a short story, or even a television drama. Those are varieties. But the original storytelling art was started by black people. I can give you two names that the Europeans celebrate, but they never think they are black people. One of them is called Aesop. Aesop. He was a black Ethiopian slave who was sent to Saudi Arabia, and he became so intelligent that he was teaching his master proverbs, anecdotes, and so on. So Aesop, everywhere you go to the channel, go to the internet, you will hear Aesop. They will say it's an Asian. It's not. From Ethiopia, it was bearded, ugly, and black. The next man, also recorded in the legends, is Lukman, also black, also sold to the Middle East. Those two personalities are recorded in the global history as the founders of good storytelling. In fact, Lukman, bearing an Islamic name, has so many stories. There were 10,000 proverbs that he assembled. He was just a herdsman leading cattle inside the bush. How did he influence people? His stories were translated. What makes a story to live long is that you take it from one medium to another medium, and they continue to grow from there. So we have the storytelling, the Osia, for example, by verbal communication, with people sitting around you and listening and applauding. But you can translate it into English, or into French, or into Italian, or into Yoruba, or into Hausa, and it will grow from there, take a wind and fly to another civilization. The story that Aesop and Lukman told, which were translated into Arabic and then from German, is what Shakespeare collected stories from to write his plays. So, what am I saying? When it comes to the art of storytelling, black people are the originators. It is the Arabs that learned from black people. When Islam came to Africa in 640 AD. So what am I concluding? Africans are the people who have taught the whole world how to tell stories. And we still have the art today. So Your Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe is a story that he gathered. Wives Revolt, a play by J.P. Clark from a Rwanda here story that he translated. So, from the point of folklore, which I studied, it is important to capture the event in the oral format. That is, go and collect it from people who know it, and then change it to different format. I guess that's what you people intend to do. And it will grow and become a teacher of the world. That's why Achebe said, a novelist is a teacher. That whatever he says, people read it, and from there, they grow. So we are the owner of stories. We were the inventors. We are the major owners. You can expand it to music, popular music. All those Black Americans that entertain us for the past 50 years. Without them, America would have collapsed morally. It's stories they are telling. So stories make the world. Stories defend the world. Stories sustain the world.
Like I said at the beginning of the show, until the lion learns to tell its story, every hunting expedition will always have the hunter on the winning side of the story. How important is it for us to tell our story?
Now, thank you very much. Storytelling, like as the Prophet said, started right from the communities where people were used to sitting down in the evenings under the trees,
Relaxation, yes.
or under the corridors of their house, or relaxation after their hard work in the farm. A majority of that is also told for us to learn and able to live it on. Live it on means that you continue to talk about it, and others who didn't know that action will begin to learn from it. It is very unfortunate that in Africa here, majority of our present generation are dropping the history of even their own immediate environment. They don't even know, because we have decided to take on the Igbo story. A story that have a root, a starting point, goes a long way to educate the people than the one that you just pick on the internet or pick on newspapers that you can't refer to. African storytelling has always been referred to people within the African continent who have actually shown that. And that is what Professor Dara have shown to us. That storytelling from the beginning of the creation of the world started from Africa. Even there are people who say that the Bible was written from Africa.
You're right.
Because you have to actually know the originators of where the thing is coming from. From Ethiopia, Egypt, and the rest of them, which were the core of Africa, where all those stories of the Bible, about Jesus Christ, about how he was born in Bethlehem, about how he was brought here, this all originated from the African continent. So the truth is that when it comes to storytelling and story for what it is, it's an originating thing from our continent. And we want that the new generations to buy that idea and go into storytelling. Do research about it, about your environment. In those days, we have common stories that are being told in the communities at every evening. All these folk stories that people sit under the trees and talk, it doesn't exist anymore. But it's still there. The stories are still there. Not that the stories are forgotten. It is the generation that carries it that matters a lot. So I think this idea that you have here to open up the community, this school is coming to the community here. And stories within the community, the children should be able to know them. So that those who come from outside will learn that when you go to Roboland, there are folk stories like this that goes on. Thank you very much. And I think with that, we can also move on.
While we are setting the record straight, how important is storytelling in shaping our identity as a people?
That's a good question. Now let's take it. First, when the white man's education came and we took to writing and reading, our stories, oral stories in particular, started going away. They were fading fast. You will recognize that if we told our stories the way we had them from beginning, I think we'll be better people today. But the white man brought their stories to us. I'll use myself as an example. Growing up, apart from the stories I learned in the village, the moment I moved from my village to Warri, all of those stories just receded. What we then had was that I read things about Huckleberry Finn, Tom Sawyer, whatever, coming from English literature. And so I saw that my own culture gradually fading away and a new one coming into me. And I want to tell you something. If it comes into you and you can't bring back that culture, it means that the children you are bringing into the world, it is what you have acquired that are going to pass on to them. That's point one. We take a second point. We live in a generation today where we are all on the internet. If you take Roboland, for instance, I wonder how much of our stories we have on the internet. It's gradually going away. We don't even have those who are telling those stories anymore. Now we are seated here. I was just asking Prof, how many of such persons we have in our culture today? Now, so when this generation goes, what's going to happen to these stories? We don't tell them on the internet. We don't even recognize the importance of the stories that we carry within us. We are the stories. And as we go, how do they put it, Prof? That when one major literary man passes away,
It's like a library. It's like a library
so you'll find
burned by
that
fire.
when one person, like he just said, that he could sing 120 Robo songs and would dance to them. I'm not sure I can do that, up to 10 of that. So if you take beyond that generation, what's going to happen? It means that even my kids today cannot tell a story in Robo, even in English, that could be ours. Because there's a way you can tell a story like I think they used to do. He told the story in English, but it was our story. It was not an English story. I think that was the explanation they gave to us for what we used to call African literature in those days. I grew into different generations. I went to school, we were reading literature in English. And somewhere along the line, we had
Literature in Africa.
African literature. African literature. So I think there's a huge difference. We have lost a lot, but I think we still have the opportunity. No matter the hurdles we have crossed, I think this is one of the opportunities to talk to our people, to talk to our minds, to talk to our intelligence, to say that we had this from the beginning. We brought them to this land. We must retrieve them. And that is what I think we should do.
Okay. I would like to congratulate the proprietor of Master Builder Institute of Media Studies. Sir, congratulations on your feat of establishing such one-of-a-kind institute. It's really wonderful. So I congratulate you. So I'll ask you this question. How do you intend to transmit the future? Like we have said here, when an elderly man dies, an entire bookshop is burnt down. How do you wish to ensure like that someone like the Ogba Unrie, the Archbishop of Knowledge of Ujeri Kingdom, that his legacy is not left to die or burn down?
Thank you. We are already doing what you asked. The question you asked, we're already doing it. I will just tell a background story. Some time ago, I became Director of Education, Health and Social Services. And I was forced to do a research on what was viable in our communities, in our cultures, for us to be able to sponsor from the angle of government. But I discovered one important thing. That Nollywood, as at that time, time flies 10, 15 years ago, was the third largest community of filmmakers, which means that Nigeria was the third largest community of filmmakers after Hollywood and Bollywood. Yeah. Nigeria, Nollywood was number 3. And the beauty of it was that not 1 naira of government was in Nollywood. It was people generated, and it was a multi-billion establishment. So that occurred to me that, look, what we are looking at, and we are I will translate. Now, whatever we have looked and ignored, or if not literally throw away our faces, is what makes our neighbors and our contemporaries to be bigger than us. Nollywood, filmmaking We are, like you said, we are in the cusp of the fourth generation of revolution. And the revolution is on the internet. The revolution is about development. And the development cannot happen if you don't tell the story of the people who are making the revolution happen. I grew up in an environment where my mother was the one that was at home with us and used to tell us all these folk stories. When Prof's elder brother was my teacher in primary 1, primary 2, you must tell a story a day. There was a time for storytelling. You have to tell a story a day. And first, I couldn't tell a story. I cried home and my mom said, Osia, we said, Osia, sat me down and told me the shortest story in the world. How cricket and a lump of clay decided to go for competition by swimming. And at the end of the span of swimming, even if it's an Olympic-sized swimming pool, the lump of clay had disappeared. And the cricket decided to laugh, and that's why his teeth are pumped. That was the story my mother told me. And I went to school the next day with this weapon, and I hit the class with the story. And from that day onward, I became a champion storyteller because I was getting the fuel from home that my mom had been telling me. One of the major problems of the generation, we have two generations here, Prof and Chief, and we have another one here of the teacher and the storyteller. But right there on the other side is the new generation. The problem of the new generation is that parents is the failure of parenting. Parents have not taken time to sit with their children in the evenings and tell them stories. Even if it is a story of how the workplace has treated you, children will be listening, but there will be no story. And the greatest culprit of that is television. You see, then we grew from television to the internet, which is now controlling something like DSTV. DSTV, if it's not used by Master Builder Institute properly, is the death of storytelling. So we are going to incorporate what we are doing, and probably we'll have a channel in DSTV as Master Builder Institute or Master Builder Storytelling channel. That is the only way to save the storytelling tradition.
It is our story. We tell it with pride.